Welcome to the Generation Kids Daily Devo podcast, where we move from wonder to worship, looking for God at work in the world around us, ready to ask the tough questions and discover what His Word has to say to us. Today's episode is titled, Okay, It's a Cliffhanger, and it comes from me, Casey Taylor. Okay, I need to get something off my chest that I've waited a while to tell you. It's not something I'm proud of, but it is something true. And for the sake of today, I feel like I can't not tell you. So, here goes. I was born in Oklahoma. There, I said it. It's out there, whatever. It's true, okay? I'm not a native Texan, but both of my parents were Texans, and they met while they were both living in Oklahoma for a short season, and then got married and had me. And then they moved back to Texas, but technically, I'm kinda, sorta, an Okie, but really a Texan at heart.
Are you sure?
I only actually lived in Oklahoma for 3.5 years before we moved back. But man, those 3.5 years were adventurous, and I actually almost died a couple of times.
What?
No, seriously, I did. In fact, one of those stories is where we're starting today. Now, in case we have any listeners from the state to the north of where I currently live, I should say that I actually enjoy Oklahoma and its people.
Mm-hmm.
But once you've been in Texas for too long, it's almost like a membership tax you have to pay that you become obnoxious about how much you love Texas. So please forgive my shunning of my heritage through technicality, but I'm eternally now and forever a proud Texan who was born in Oklahoma. Anyway, when I was around 2 and very much a resident of the Sooner State, my family used to like to go to one of those wildlife preserves where you drive around with a feed bucket that they make you pay for, filled with stinky little pellets. These pellets were what attracted all of the live exotic animals towards your car. And then they would literally stick their heads inside your car to try to get the pellets from your feed buckets. And I don't know what you're imagining in your head right now, but it might as well have been the last food on the face of the planet to those animals because they literally attacked those buckets through your windows like, well, animals. So I guess we should have expected it. The animals weren't the problem in the story, though, because, you see, when we arrived, the guide offered us a map so we could understand the terrain and the flow of traffic for the preserve to make sure we got from where it started to where it ended. Now, my dad decided he didn't need it, and because of the time in technological history that the story took place, we didn't have mapping apps on our phone or even printed out directions. So basically, he decided he'd just wing it on pure vibes and self-confidence. He didn't accept the help and guidance that could have easily made the story just a fun memory, but not a life-threatening one. To make a long story shorter, we got a little lost. And while fighting off some zebras who nearly took my mom's hands off as she held out our feed bucket, my dad looked around and decided, again, without a map, to back away from the zebras so we could turn around and go back the way that we had come, which seems fair enough, only backing up from that spot caused our front 2 wheels to pop up into the air as the rear of our car rolled right off the edge of a small cliff and then settled down on a water drain coming out of the side of the little mountain we were on as my dad slammed on the brakes, causing the rubber on our tires to catch in just enough time for us to not roll off of the cliff. I'll go ahead and tell you that my mom and I eventually crawled over my dad's lap, who was in the driver's seat, through his window, on top of the hood of the car, and hopped off of it and waited for a tow truck to come and pull my dad off the side of a cliff. Now, side note, whenever you see weird signs that say to not do obvious things, they're usually there for a reason. My dad was the reason they put in guardrails and had signs warning of the cliffs. I can't be for sure, but I bet it says something like, no cliff diving, or driving. Now, this story illustrates a point that the Bible tells us many times over, in many different ways. I could have mentioned the verse in Proverbs 16, which says that pride comes before the fall, but thankfully for my family, it only came before we mostly backed off of a cliff. But anyway, the verse we're actually looking at today is found in Proverbs 15.
Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Proverbs 15:22.
My dad was so convinced that he had everything he needed to succeed, that in neglecting the guide's map, along with the knowledge it offered us about the terrain around us, he nearly drove us off an actual cliff and cost us our lives. We love to be self-sufficient people, don't we? I mean, I can remember my daughter, the one you hear reading the verses each day, at 2 years old, constantly telling my wife and I, "Not you, only me." And while learning the hard way can sometimes be a good teacher for hard lessons, when we learn to seek wise counsel and to ask people who know better than we do, either through lessons learned or experienced, we have a much better chance at succeeding in life. This is what Proverbs is telling us. Wisdom, or counsel as this version says, is important. And those who don't seek it run the risk of failure, not because success wasn't an option, but because in moving forward with incomplete information, we are literally asking for something to go wrong or to be humbled, and a lot of times avoidably so. So my encouragement to you today, other than not to drive off cliffs or maybe move to Oklahoma.
I'm sorry.
I
What?
kid. Is to be a person who doesn't prepare to fail by failing to prepare. Be a person instead who knows and accepts that the people around you and the lessons that they've learned are God's gift to you in your own learning experience. Asking for help isn't a weakness. It's a different type of strength in disguise. It's strength in numbers, and that you can count on. Now it's time for
Today's big question!
Today's big question is, what's a lesson in your own life that you had to learn the hard way? How might things have turned out differently had you sought or listened to some wise counsel beforehand? I encourage you to take what you've learned and let it be a guardrail or a warning sign to someone else in your life. 'Cause after all, we're all in this together. Thanks for listening to the Generation Kids Daily Devo podcast. If you want to keep in touch with us on all our social media platforms, check out the links in the description. And if you'd like to help support us as we continue to create meaningful content for kids of all generations, please subscribe to our Patreon by visiting us at patreon.com/wearegenerationkids.